My own mother stole the man I was engaged to, the one I was planning to marry, and treated me like a nobody in the company she barely understood but depended on. But when she thought she'd won, she didn't know I held the real power all along. This is the story of how I took everything back and left her with nothing. I always believed family meant loyalty, especially when that family was everything I thought I could count on. But sometimes the people closest to you can cut the deepest wounds, and no one taught me that lesson harder than my own mother. Our family was known in the city for our real estate empire, a sprawling business built from the ground up by my late father. He was the visionary, the driving force who transformed empty lots into towering office buildings, and who made our name synonymous with success. When he passed away, the business needed someone to step up and keep his legacy alive. That person was supposed to be my mother, the CEO and heir. But the reality was more complicated. Mom's strengths weren't in the details. She loved the spotlight, the charity galas, the social media followers, the luxury lifestyle. But the real work, the blood and sweat of running a company, fell to me. I was 24, and every day I was the one making deals, smoothing over client concerns and keeping the company's wheels turning. I didn't just work there. I was the glue holding it together. Yet, in the eyes of the family, and especially my mother, I was more of an employee than a daughter. Unlike her other children who thrived on the social media fame and glamorous lifestyle, I preferred to keep my head down, focus on business, and stay out of the drama. That, I think, was my downfall in her eyes. And then there was him, my fiancé, the one person I thought I could trust without question. We'd been together for years, and recently we started talking seriously about marriage. The kind of future you dream about when you think everything is perfect. The wedding plans were still just ideas, whispered conversations and quiet moments, but the hope was real. I was happy, or at least I thought I was. It was late one evening when everything changed. I was still at the office going over reports that never seemed to end when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a close friend, someone who knew me well enough to sense when something was wrong. She told me she saw my mother and my fiancé at a charity gala together. Not just at the same event, together, laughing, whispering like conspirators. At first, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they were talking business, or maybe it was just a chance encounter. But the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I confronted my fiancé. His face was a mixture of guilt and shame, but his words were empty promises, apologies that sounded rehearsed. The man I loved was no longer mine. My mother had taken him, right from under my nose like some twisted game. But the betrayal didn't stop there. When I looked around the family business, I realized that my mother treated me like I was invisible, like a hired hand, rather than the daughter who had kept the company alive after Dad's death. She boasted about her role as CEO, but didn't understand the deals I made, the clients I kept happy, or the crises I managed. To her, I was just someone who got in the way. That realization cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I confronted her, trying to make sense of it all. Her cold response was worse than any slap in the face. She dismissed me as jealous, accused me of overstepping, and acted like she was entitled to everything. The company, the lifestyle, even the man I was supposed to marry. In that moment, I felt small, erased, like everything I had worked for meant nothing. But beneath the hurt, something inside me stirred, a quiet fire. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I had a future my mother didn't know about, a secret waiting to be unleashed. My father, before he died, had set up a private fund for me, one I couldn't touch until I turned 25. A nest egg he hoped would give me a chance to carve my own path, away from the family shadow. That fund was my lifeline. So while my mother continued to bask in her hollow victory, I started planning. Not revenge born from rage, but a calculated, deliberate reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. I would prove that real power isn't in the name or the title, but in the work, the vision, and the strength to rise after being knocked down. And I was just getting started. After the betrayal, I knew I couldn't stay in that house, that company, or that life any longer. The place where I'd grown up, worked tirelessly, and dreamed of building a future with the man I loved had turned cold and empty. But quitting wasn't about running away. It was about starting something new, something mine. For years, I had kept quiet about the private fund my father had set aside for me. It was his way of giving me a chance to prove myself on my own terms, a safety net waiting to be used once I turned 25. Now that the time had come, I took every penny and channeled it into launching my own real estate company. I didn't want to compete with my mother. I wanted to show the world what real leadership looked like. Starting fresh wasn't easy. The business world is brutal, especially when you're a young woman stepping into an industry dominated by older men and long-standing family names. But I had one advantage: the knowledge and connections I'd built quietly, working day and night behind the scenes in the family company. Clients I'd once helped to secure for my mother's firm now became the foundation of my own. Word spread quickly about the new company run by someone who understood the business from the ground up. My reputation grew, not because of flashy parties or social media, but because I delivered results. Meanwhile, my mother's empire was beginning to unravel. Without the hands-on management and business acumen that Dad and I had provided, cracks appeared in her carefully crafted facade. Deals fell through, clients grew restless, and debt quietly mounted. But she refused to admit any weakness. Instead, she clung harder to her luxurious lifestyle: designer clothes, extravagant vacations, and endless social events. I watched from the sidelines, biding my time. Her world was a house of cards, and I held the key to bringing it down. There were moments I felt a pang of sadness, regret even, for the family I once thought I had. But that feeling was quickly replaced by determination. I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for my future, my independence, and my dignity. Slowly, one by one, I began to reach out to the biggest clients my mother's company had. At first, they hesitated. Loyalty to the family name runs deep, after all. But when they saw the difference in service, the attention to detail, and the honesty I offered, they started to switch allegiances. Word spread that the real power was no longer in the old company, but with the young woman who had been underestimated and overlooked for too long. By the time my mother realized what was happening, it was too late. Her empire was crumbling, and I was rising. The man who had once been my fiancé, the man who had been stolen from me, had vanished too. She lost him to a younger, flashier woman, someone who mirrored the life my mother had always admired. In the quiet moments between board meetings and contract signings, I allowed myself a small, private smile. The tables were turning, and I was finally in control. But this was only the beginning. By the time I launched my company, I had no illusions about what I was up against. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Every contract I signed, every client I won, felt like a small victory in a war I never asked for, but was determined to win. My mother's once unshakable empire was crumbling under the weight of her arrogance and lack of experience. Clients that had been loyal for years were slipping through her fingers, one by one. They came to me because I understood their needs. I listened. I fought for them like I had fought for the business all along. The final blow came quietly but decisively. I secured a major deal, one my mother's company had been courting for months but failed to close. It was the kind of contract that could save a business like hers, but it slipped through her fingers and landed on my desk. When she found out, I'm sure it broke something inside her: the facade, the pride, the illusion of control she had clung to for so long. But I didn't gloat. My revenge wasn't in loud victories or petty retaliation. It was in proving that I was the real legacy, the real strength behind the family name. Her debts grew, and the lavish lifestyle she loved so much began to crumble. The company was auctioned off, and the luxurious mansion she called home was no longer hers. She was humbled, forced to face the consequences of her choices. As for the man she stole, he left too, chasing empty promises and younger, flashier women who cared more about status than substance. Watching him disappear was bittersweet. It wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. I stood at the edge of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was tempered by pride and strength. I wasn't just the girl who got hurt. I was the woman who rose, who fought, and who won. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by the people you love, remember this: your pain doesn't define you, your strength does. Don't let anyone else write your story. Take control, build your future, and show the world the power you hold. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories of strength and redemption. And tell me, what's your story? Drop a comment below. I'm listening.